Like, just calm down, folks. Just calm down.
And welcome in to the Best Boys Center Ice podcast, 2026 Stanley Cup Playoff recap show. I'm Barry Bess, along with my son Carson. And as you well know, every night during the Stanley Cup playoffs, we come on after the last game and we recap what's going on, what went on in those games, and preview the upcoming games. And tonight, we had a unique situation come up where we had a couple of elimination games involving two teams who were in the last two Western Conference finals, the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers, both playing on the road, both playing against very good teams. And as it turned out, both teams, well, let's put it this way. We're going to have a new champion in the Western Conference coming up this season. And for the first time in 3 or 4 years, the Dallas Stars won't be in the Western Conference final, as both the Oilers and the Stars were eliminated today by the exact same score of 5-2. So we'll, of course, with me being an Oiler fan, we'll get into the Oiler game, and I can give my kind of like my postseason comments. But first, the first game of the night, Carson, was in Minnesota, in St. Paul, the Wild against Dallas, and it was the opportunity for the Wild to win at home, win a series at home for the first time since they beat the Blues. I think in 2015, I think was the last time that they won a series, and they just looked they looked like the better team throughout. There was an interesting stat that I saw with Dallas. Dallas had, I can't remember, they had something like almost 250 some odd minutes between even strength 5-on-5 goals. They had like
Wow.
10 power, they had 10 power play goals in the series. And I think they had, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had more power play goals than they did 5-on-5 goals.
Hmm.
And yeah, we always say, having a strong power play is key to winning. But that's all you got. If you can't play and score 5-on-5, then, those 10 power play goals go for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, again, the Hungary team won that series. I think Minnesota from the start to the end was the consistent team out of the two. They controlled play a lot. Their special teams was pretty good. Again, I know they let in a lot of power play goals, but they equally scored a good amount. And they had some crucial kills at crucial times. Also, 5-on-5, they were the better team, as it turns out.
Mhm.
And the Otter just had a rough series. I mean, he just
Yeah.
was inconsistent, and that's all you need. And that Wallstead was great for the Wild. I mean, he kept them in it, and it's just unfortunate. I mean, again, we'll get into this with Oilers, but with Dallas, I mean, what do you really do now? I mean,
Mhm.
they've been kind of on this same story the last few seasons where they've had such a good team and it just kind of falls apart. Obviously, I mentioned Robertson may not be back next season because of his contract, and there's going to be teams that are going to be willing to pay for him to go. And you wonder what direction Dallas is going to go in. They made a coaching change this season and didn't work out. Minnesota gets the best of it, and they move on to what'll be, I think, my favorite series of the second round,
Mhm.
Minnesota, Colorado. It's going to be a heavyweight battle. Very exciting. But yeah, kudos to the Wild. They finally get to the second round, and we'll see what kind of damage they do. This is their shot to make it. But they have a tough test waiting, as do the Avalanche. That's a tough team that they're going to have to play.
Mhm.
But kudos to both teams in a great series. Unfortunate for Dallas, just wasn't in the cards. But good for Minnesota. They get the job done. And then I'll go into this one for you because, like you did
Mhm.
yesterday for the Penguins, it's been an unfortunate 24 some odd hours for both of us.
Yeah.
Both of our teams get knocked out by the same series final 4-2. as the Anaheim Ducks defeat the Edmonton Oilers in Game 6 on home ice to make it to the second round. I look at this series and I just look at like the Ducks. They controlled for the most part the offensive portion of it, where they were able to score a lot of goals, and that's where their bread and butter was all season. And the Oilers just did not have an answer for it, except for Game 5. The Ducks just were they were the faster team, they were the hungrier team, they were the better team. They had more consistent goaltending. They just were putting the puck in the net. Their special teams was great. I mean, they were scoring power play goals left and right. I mean, it was almost like a death sentence anytime the Oilers took a penalty. And that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch out for
Mhm.
Vegas or Utah. But interesting to see. I mean, even though I biased to always say the Oilers because of you, I really thought the Oilers are going to win the series going into it. But certain factors, I mean, McDavid just was injured. I mean, he didn't play. It wasn't 100%. But I mean, again, the goaltending for the Oilers was just a problem the entire season. We knew it coming in. It was going to be
Yeah.
something they'd have to face adversity and come over, and they just could not do it. Just a lot of pressure to put on Connor Ingram, again, a guy that wasn't really an NHL goalie ever. And he had his issues where he was in the player assistance program, got brought out of it, was in Bakersfield for a while, and then all of a sudden he takes Calvin Picker's spot. And then before you know it, Jars kind of just fell off a little while off the face of the earth, and there you go.
Mhm.
Connor Ingram's a starting goalie in the NHL all of a sudden. So I give him props. He had a really good season. He really did. He played amazing.
Yeah.
He did all he could. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy that, in the first place, probably shouldn't have been in that spot. Uh, you know, it's 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 a bad look on Bowman on that, because of he took the big swing on Jari and it didn't work, and you're paying him all that money and he didn't play. He played one game. But that's how this game goes. It's brutal. It's cruel. It sucks. You want to see McDavid get a cup in Edmonton, and it's not meant in the cards this year. Kudos to the Anaheim Ducks. They are a hungry team,
Mhm.
and it's going to be a tough battle for whoever faces them. But again, the Ducks win the series 4-2, carried by their power play and their strong starts to the hockey games for the most part through this series. And that's what it took for them. They followed their game plan. They stuck to it. And they do have a veteran coach behind the bench, Joe Quinville, who's won before. He knows what it takes, and that's the guy they needed back there. And they've got same thing as what the Flyers have, that young, fun energy that they're out there having fun. And a team that's probably not supposed to really be doing this, and they are, and they're on to the second round. And unfortunately, again, the Oilers will be Connor McDavid will be given a call to Sid here tomorrow to ask him when he wants to play golf on Saturday
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Sunday, unfortunately. But yeah, just an unfortunate end. Not
Mhm.
not how I wanted it to go this season for the Oilers. But what are your thoughts on all of this, and how you feel after?
Right. Well, I'm sitting here today, and even during this series, have had a feeling a kind of a bad feeling in my stomach that this could be the team that could beat the Oilers in the first round. The LA was not the team that was going to ever do it. As you know, I didn't think. Of course, you always think that your team's going to win the Stanley Cup every year. We always think that. But looking at Colorado, I was thinking, man, I don't know if it's going to be or even if the Oilers get to the Western Conference Final, if they play Colorado, that Colorado team is just unbelievable. But you want your team to succeed and you want your team to get out of the first round. And like the Penguins, you had been out of the playoffs for a couple of years. Seeing them back in the playoffs was exciting, and you wanted to keep it going. And I'm not saying that the playoffs are not exciting, but when your team that you're cheering for is out, it's a bit of a letdown. And I was sitting here watching the game, and every game, the first 5 games, the Oilers scored first. Even though Anaheim did win 3 of those games. And this time around, it was the script was flipped as Anaheim scored 3 goals in the first period. And after that, in my head, I was just like, well, I just got a bad feeling about this. And you're right, Connor McDavid was injured. He got injured in the first game in a just a friendly fire incident with Matthias Ekholm. I would say it's going to be probably diagnosed as a high ankle sprain.
Mm-hmm.
It was so funny because he had a shift tonight of 9 seconds, and that's Connor McDavid. And like kudos to him because he could have pulled Austin Matthews a couple of years ago and get hurt and then not play in your team's most important game. But I look at Leon Draisaitl. He still had a great series. I think he had 10 points in the series. Guys like Podkolzin really came up and played.
Hmm.
Kapanen had 4
He had
goals.
a great series. Cappy had a good series.
Cappy
Holy.
had a great series. Um, the Connor Murphy had looked really good. He looked like he fit in with the Oilers after coming from the trade deadline. It would be interesting if they'd be able to keep him on.
Oh, I hope that they should.
And then you go between the pipes, and I've talked about this for years. The Edmonton Oilers, if they want to win the Stanley Cup and seriously want to win the Stanley Cup, they have to get an elite goaltender. And they don't have that. They haven't had that. Stu was an emotionally good goaltender. He got him to the finals. Calvin Pickard, of course, was there as a backup. But even before that, so the goaltending that they had was not good enough to get anywhere in the playoffs. This year, like you kind of said, Connor Ingram had a great season, but he's not a starting goaltender. Not yet, anyways. And I think he literally was shaken. And then the first of the first 3 goals, you really 2 of them were like tips. No goaltender is going to be able to get. You know, one tipped twice and went over his shoulder. So he can't be completely blamed. The defense, of course, it kind of fell apart. Another thing that they're going to have to work on. And like you said, now what does Connor McDavid do? I think Connor's signed just a short deal with Edmonton. I think it's 2 more years,
2 more
maybe.
years, yeah, after this
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
And so I said on my post that I did on Facebook here just before the show, is the Draisaitl McDavid era window closed? I don't think so. I think it's still open. It's just the fact that they're fine. Some of the offense, if they can keep the guys that they had around this year for next year,
Hmm.
they'll be fine. If they can shore up the defense a little bit, but they need to go out this summer and get an elite goaltender because Jari wasn't the answer.
Mm-mm.
They traded Stu. Stu wasn't the answer in Edmonton. You go back to even like guys like Mike Smith. He was good, but he wasn't the answer for Edmonton. Nikolai Javibulin came in as many years back as one of the big name goaltenders, so he didn't work out.
Well, we talked about
Um,
it too when that happened, that neither guy that we each got was going to be the permanent answer.
no.
I knew that Stu wasn't going to be the permanent answer in net for Pittsburgh, and Jari wasn't going to be there. And it's a question mark, honestly, as far as why Bowman did that, because of the
Mhm.
fact that Stu's deal was up anyways after this year. So, worst case, okay, you probably get the same result, but you're done with it now. Versus now, they've got
Mhm.
Jars for another year. But I agree. If you're McDavid, you're probably hounding him, be like, you need to do
Mhm.
something now because
Because
he's gonna leave. If he
yeah,
if Bowman just sits on his butt and does nothing the rest of the off season or even trade deadline next year, and he doesn't bring a goalie in that has pedigree, he McDavid's done. I mean, we've talked about it before, Dad. All these teams that have won Stanley Cups have these high pedigree goalies. The only kind of, I would say, exception to it, and not really, would be Aiden Hill, just because he
yeah.
kind of like sprung in the moment, came up out of nowhere, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden was a Stanley Cup champion. But I mean, okay, Bob Vasilevsky, Braden Holtby, Matt Murray, Jordan Binnington, Corey Crawford, Jonathan Quick, Tim Thomas. You keep going back until the early 2000s, even the 1990s, 1980s. Those teams that won the cup had an A-list goalie.
Yeah.
And the Oilers just, yeah, right now don't. I mean, Connor Ingram, all the credit to him because he came into a situation that he probably was not expecting to be in this season where he would be starting in the playoffs. But he is a more capable goalie out of him and Jari because he's accountable for what he does. He takes ownership. He's the right guy for that team, and I hope they keep him around for a backup. But they need that A tier goaltender. They absolutely, you take whatever cost you get. Yeah, at the cost of you not giving up McDavid, Draisaitl, you have to go for it now. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but if that means you're giving up, I hate to say it, but if you're giving up Podkolzin, if you're giving up
Mhm.
Roslovic, if you're giving up Cap, you have to do something because this isn't going to work. It's not going to happen. It's going to be the same story every year, and this is it. Really, this season is it. Like, if he doesn't do anything this year, McDavid's going to have 1 year left on his contract, and at that point, they're going to be having those discussions where he's going to be like, okay, you guys got to do something to get me out of here because, or the Oilers are going to have to make a business decision, I should say, because if they feel like he's not going to stay, you got to get something for him because the
Yeah,
team's going
you
to pay
can't
an arm
just
and a
let him
leg for
go.
him. They're going to pay a lot for him, and that'd be a big mistake if they let him walk for nothing.
Yeah.
So Bowman's got his hands full
Mhm.
this offseason to get a goaltender in there that can um,
Mhm.
win, and at the same time just continue to shore up the forward depth, which I think is very good for the Oilers. I mean, guys like Happy, uh, Broslovic, Podkolzin, Savoy, those guys are all
Mhm.
good fits in that team. They've got the forward depth. They could shore up the defense a little bit better, but
Yeah.
the goaltending is the main piece to this recipe. I think the Oilers, if you had this series have a uh, a Vasilevsky or a Bob or whatever you want to call it. I think the Oilers win this series simply based upon that. The only difference is the goaltending
Yeah.
because we know they can score, and this series was a challenge for them because they played an Anaheim team that's their forte is scoring goals, and that they met their match. They met
Mhm.
their match, and in matchups like this, it's going to go one way or the other. And the seesaw turns the way for the Ducks, and they move on. But yeah, he's Bowman's got work to do on that.
Yeah.
That's what he's got to do.
So I'll say it. I've been an Oiler fan since they were in the World Hockey League back in the '70s, and watching the team in the '80s win the five Stanley Cups in five in like 6, 7 years or whatever it was that they did. And then seeing the lean times, and then seeing the McDavid era start, and the Draisaitl era start, and then being excited about seeing them in the Stanley Cup finals 2 years in a row. And that I don't take too much solace in it, but going to the Stanley Cup finals 2 years in a row, that's a lot of hockey. And then you look at guys like McDavid, they played in the Olympics.
Mhm.
They didn't
Four
get a
Nations,
break.
Olympics, all that stuff.
Four nations, they didn't get a break. I think you're right. It comes down to what, and to me, if Bowman doesn't do anything, then the ownership of the Oilers has to do something and pull the trigger on getting a better general manager.
Because you
Because
can't show McDavid that you don't care. You
you
can't
know,
tell your franchise cornerstone, the best, who's probably going to go down as the best skilled player of all time,
mhm,
that, oh, we don't care about you winning. We don't
yeah,
care about that. We just want to fill seats because they're going to fill seats regardless.
mhm,
But you need to prove to him that you want to win.
yeah, and and I think, yeah, I don't know who's gonna be out there. I don't know who's going to be available goaltending
You
wise
go for whatever you can.
in the offseason, but you get something better than what you have, and you get something. And yeah, if you can get a solid goaltender that'll get you like big wins, then McDavid's going to want to stick around. But if they don't do anything like they haven't done for
You won't want to.
3 years, would you stay around? I know Draisaitl's going to be there for a while. But
Yeah.
you know, excuse me.
Yeah.
But and all in all, it really has been fun watching this team get to the Stanley Cup Finals, and watching them lose is not easy. But you always know that the great thing about the game is that, hey, next season's
Well,
only a
and they'll
few
be
months away,
back. The thing is,
and they'll be back.
the Oilers will be back in the playoffs. That's not a question. It's just a matter of, okay, next year, can they just make that leap? That leap just to.
Mhm.
It's hard to win in this league, and that's one thing like I've reflected on the last 24 hours since the Penguins got eliminated. It's hard to win in this
Mhm.
league. It really is. I mean, so many things have to go right and go your way for you just to win one round. Not mention
Yeah.
four. to even get to the Cup final is a crazy feat. But unfortunately, it's you either win or you lose. There's one winner, and there's 31 teams that didn't win, and that's the unfortunate part about this game is that some teams get one shot and that's it, and it's gone. And you don't see it again. I mean, look at Minnesota's waited so long, and they've only been to the final when they were the North Stars. You
Yeah.
know, you wait so long, and it's take advantage of the opportunity. I know those guys definitely in that room kick themselves every day, probably for the fact that they didn't win one of those series against Florida. And
Yeah.
they're going to be back. I think
Yeah.
you believe in the fort.
And you go back to those Florida series and like the first year where they were down 0-3 and came back and almost won it in game 7. That was exciting. And then I keep going back. I went back to this a couple of times in my head thinking about Zach Hyman injury against Dallas last year in the conference finals. And what if he was going to be healthy? Because he was on a roll. He was he was hitting everybody, he was scoring. What if? It was a lot of what ifs. Well, now
Yeah.
what if the Oilers had better goaltending? And now it is time for Bowman, if he's going to do anything that's going to be serious. Like, I think he brought in the guys from Chicago this year that really fit in, Dickinson and
Yeah.
Murphy. Okay,
You
he's
don't
he's
change the
done that.
forward group. You don't change
No,
that. I think
but
you're going to
you've
have
got
to, though. They're going to have to get rid of somebody to get something, unless you
yeah.
have a free agent goalie
Mhm,
that's going to go there. Otherwise, you're going to have to make some kind of trade deal. But the
mhm.
forwards, you keep the exact, because I mean it's working. They mesh really well. They play, they feed off of each other. Uh, it's just like Florida
Mhm.
this year. They even though they were hurt, those guys are exhausted. You've played so much hockey the last
Yeah.
couple seasons, and the off seasons have only gotten shorter now because of how long the playoff stretch is. Uh, even next year, there's going to be two more games in the season next year. There's going to be 84 games now. You're adding two games to the schedule. Your training camp starts basically 2 months after the playoffs end, and that doesn't count in like time that you
Mhm.
take your time to recover. You go on a vacation, you come back, and you're training, and you're back in there again. So they've played a lot of hockey, and you give them that kind of grace. Um, but I think you would give a lot more grace if they had that cup, one of them.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so fun is that they're going to ride back next year
Mhm.
and be back in this spot again where they're competing. Bowman needs to do his job and you know do it for the right reason. Don't worry about
Yeah.
making the big buck. Worry about putting the winning product in the ice, because putting the winning product in the ice is going to help him uh,
Mhm.
get maybe a better position in the future or make more money in the future. But that's going to be the hard part. That's the hard part about some of these ownership groups and people right now, is that they don't care about the right things. They care
Right.
more about being lucrative instead of putting a winning team out there to win the cup. The winning the cup is not important to, in my opinion, to these ownership groups and some of the individual ownership people, that they don't care about that. They care about the money that's rolling in. They could care less about the product on the ice. And that can
Yeah.
sometimes be very maddening and frustrating.
Yeah. So Anaheim wins. They were definitely the better team. They move on to play either Utah or Las Vegas. We could find out the winner of that series tomorrow night. As that game goes in Utah, it's a late game tomorrow night. That's a game 6. We got two other game 6s to go tomorrow as well. Tampa Bay in Montreal against the Canadiens, and that's a 6 o'clock start Central Time here in Texas. Looking at Montreal, I'm looking at Montreal now to kind of take that serious. I like what Montreal has. They got some young players,
Hmm.
and they're just on a roll. They're the only Canadian team left now out of the 3 that made the playoffs. They're the only Canadian team left, and we know the story is they're Montreal Canadiens were the last Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup in the what was it,
1993.
1993. So as a Canadian cheering for Montreal in the East, and then you got the other series with his Buffalo Boston. Of course, we've all been on the Sabres bandwagon, I think, since mid part of the season. I love to see Buffalo take this, win it out. eliminate Boston in the game 6, and then, like I mentioned, the other game 6 tomorrow night is Utah and Vegas in Utah. I saw a little spark from Vegas the other night in game 5, but I still am going. I still got a feeling, Utah's going to come back in this one. But now I'm kind of leaning towards maybe Vegas taking the series in 7. I just saw a little bit more of a spark from Vegas for the first time in the series, and if you get that team a spark, they can run. They can go a long ways with it. But of the teams that have, the teams that have made the series that we already have set up, there's only 2 series that have been set up. The Carolina Philly series. I just think Carolina's got too much for Philly in that one, and then Colorado, Minnesota. I was thinking, well, I think it's just going to be Colorado, but I don't know. Minnesota is a different animal than they have been, and I think that's the only team that will give Colorado a scare, and that's the only team of the teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs that I think could beat Colorado because they played them the most. But that's going to be
I actually think that they can I think they're going to upset them. I think for whatever reason, I think they've just got it going on right now in Minnesota. Their guys are playing unbelievable. Their Colorado's Achilles heel has been the power play, and if they don't get it rolling, they're in trouble. I mean, Minnesota's has been deadly. They've been killer on theirs, and that's going to be a big difference. Also, Minnesota's going into the series fresh because they've just won a series and they've played some good hockey, and Colorado's been sitting. It's going to be a long series. That's going to be a 6 or 7 gamer, but I think Minnesota upsets. And then I agree, not just because the Flyers beat the Penguins, but I just think Carolina's just they're a team that plays so good in the beginning of the playoffs. It's hard to beat them right away. Philly, I think maybe can get under their skin a little bit like they did with Pittsburgh, where they're trying to start stuff after the whistles. But I think Carolina is more of a disciplined team and a more structured team that they're not going to let that really happen. And I think that offensively, they're going to be able to carry the play more than the Flyers will. But I think that the Flyers can sneak a game and make it to 5. But they're just like I said last year, Carolina's a hard team to play in the first part of the playoffs, and as it gets deeper, it's harder for them to play and make it because then the game really shifts a lot. And the only kind of lining to it, I think it's going to be an interesting goaltending battle there with Anderson and Vladar, 2 guys that really have not gone far in the playoffs before. But I think the difference in the series is simply just going to be the way that Carolina pressures, and it's going to force Philly to be more aggressive and to make take chances that they really didn't have to take against Pittsburgh that they're not going to have to do, and it's going to open up the ice. So two very good series in their own rights.
Yeah, so we got lots of great hockey yet to come. We'll be on tomorrow night after the Utah and Vegas game late. And like I said, we're here every night after the last game of the Stanley Cup playoffs that night.
Yep.
We'll get you through the first round. Maybe we'll have the end of the first. We could have the end of the first round tomorrow night. We'll see what happens with these 3 game 6s, and then we'll move on from there. But again, the Ducks move on, and the Minnesota Wild move on, and the Best Boy Center Ice podcast will move on. And you can get us on Facebook Live here and also on our YouTube channel, the Best Boys Center Ice podcast on YouTube. Both will be replayed here in just a little bit. Well, Carson, great stuff again with the graphics always. And I know it's we've been almost every night staying up late, and I appreciate you sticking around and getting this done, even though you were working hard during the day.
Okay.
But it's great, and it's disappointing our teams are out of the playoffs in the first round, but still lots of great hockey.
Same time, it's still enjoyable though. It really is. It's still enjoyable, and I mean, you don't get as anxious anymore because
you can
obviously we're both still going to be very much craving that feeling of being so. But it's more enjoyable to watch when you don't have anything
Yeah.
really on the line for it. It's just getting to enjoy.
You could actually, it's relaxing. You could actually sit back and relax and watch and not be on the edge of your seat. All right. So we will be with you again tomorrow night after the Utah and Vegas game. Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight live. I know it's a late night. And in the meantime, and in between time, everybody have a great hockey.